Morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to the latest edition of our Reimagining the Ecosystem series. And the focus of this edition today is reimagining the Greenlight. I'll just let everyone take a moment to get settled. If you would be so kind, if anyone could just say hi in the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from. And yeah, we'll get started in just a moment. And yeah, hey, Wendy. Yeah, we have definitely, we've got a wide geographic reach here already. It's great. Hi from Mexico. Hello, everyone. So this is great. It's very exciting. I think this is a great day, right? It's a great day to be hosting a webinar on greenlighting. We're just joking. We'll see whether we'd plan to coincide with the tentative agreement between SAG-AFTRA and the Alliance of Motion Picture TV Producers. I think the strike is over, guys, which is very exciting. And it's a great moment to be talking about the Greenlight process, because on one hand, we've reached hopefully we've touched wood, we reached the end of this, this dark time of the strike. But what is the world we're going back to? What is so many of the issues that were there before persist? And there has never been so much content being produced, yet so many titles not reaching their audience, not reaching their market as well. And so there's definitely something not right. And so the opportunity today is to really reimagine that, think about and break down what are the opportunities. How can we make better collective decision making in the production process? And I am beyond thrilled to have an amazing panel here today of experts across the space, and I'll introduce them briefly, but you'll get to know them throughout the course of this episode, no doubt. And so we have producer, filmmaker Ted Hope. Hi, Ted. Irina Albita, who is co-founder, co-CEO of Film Chain, and Anjali Mida, CEO of Diesel Labs and founder of Diesel Labs as well. Hi, everyone. And so, I think we should just jump right in. Ted, great to have you here on the webinar today. I know you've been extremely busy recently, touring many festivals with your latest production. Yeah, tell us about that experience, and I suppose, that experience of taking a movie to festivals. How do you gauge the market, and what's your sort of focus at this time?
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. It's great. It's great to be here and participating with everybody. When festivals, you can't deny are also markets, right? That they are where films are discovered, where films are sold, where the kind of often a early place in the chain of audience development, right? And and it's not just the doom and gloom of two strikes in the U.S. happening simultaneously. The year started off with Sundance, with only a handful of films being acquired, right? And however you want to evaluate that, recognizing that films unacquired allows you to say, like, there seems to be a flaw in the Greenlight process, right? Because how these films getting made and not getting sold, that's generally the goal. And one of the things that you see, in kind of the taking the temperature of the room when you're out on the festivals, as we are with Invisible Nation, my wife's film on the Taiwan geopolitical predicament right now, how to get that in, made sure impression, Invisible Nation. You start to see that we've really spent, particularly on the indie side of things, 50 years of building things the wrong way. Like, that's the situation we're in now. And that often comes down to the fact that the private equity in the space goes to production, It doesn't go to production and marketing and distribution, as a lot of people have been saying it should for at least 15 or 20 years. And it certainly doesn't go to production, marketing, distribution, and infrastructure rebuild, right? And that's perhaps the most crucial and almost defining moment of this time, because one of the things that, I think we can recognize is that in any ecosystem, right? In any ecosystem, you can spot tons of operational improvements to both the product and the process that could be done, but are less unaddressed, because at least for those that reap the biggest rewards, it's good enough, right? It doesn't need to be fixed. But those become really critical for all of the outsiders on the other side of that gate that are trying to course correct in both what the product is, like make better movies, but also how we do things. And if those all got addressed, it would be transformable, right? You look at something like Amazon, right? Where I had the privilege of working for 5.5 years. And it wasn't an online bookstore that Jeff Bezos was building, right? From the beginning, he was building a better infrastructure for the fulfillment and delivery industry and lifting all of that up. And by addressing all of those needs, he became indispensable to the entire world, right? And that's really the neglect we've had in the independent film space, and really the studio space, the Hollywood space too. We are not actually addressing all of the changes that have occurred or using all the tools that we have, right? We could lift all boats if the equity markets kind of shifted and said, let's address operational improvements. Let's try to make sure that we improve our processes. So that's step one, right? Like that, you see that cultural and complete neglect within our ecosystem. And step two is, how do these films get greenlit in the first place? Not that they're bad, but they're not necessarily always addressing the needs or the existing ecosystem's ability to bring those to audiences and engage. There are flaws in the process. I need to shut up, or I'll just keep talking for an hour.
Yeah, and and I guess there's lots of questions which spin off from that. Is that, what would that look like? How can we build that better or more effective model collectively? And I suppose it starts with, it's a segue to other panelists, companies like FilmChain and Diesel Labs. I mean, maybe start with you, Irina, if I may. FilmChain, tell us about that and how you see, from your vantage point, what are the sort of pieces of information that when you're talking to filmmakers, you're talking to producers and commissioning bodies, what are the pieces of information that you're often seeing that they lack in the process?
Thank you, Alex. There are so many anchor points in Ted's introduction that, yes, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in the process, in the operations, in the business of film, TV, not so much of course, on the creative side as well, but in the business of film, when it comes to the actual greenlighting process, the funds. Well, a lot of them, both in Europe, in the US, in Canada, and Australia, because we work across the globe with financiers, it's really, we're looking at building that transparency for the financiers to have a better understanding of their return on the investment. And I think that sits somewhere between the producers and the financiers, improving that communication, improving that flow of information and that data flow. Ultimately, the financiers want to see, well, how much am I going to make out of this? We have to be frank. That's their core question. And the producers at the same time need to be fueled with the right data and be educated with the right data to be able to communicate with those financiers. So one of the things, particularly as a digital collection account system, we're enabling, and this is for us has been core principle from day one, is we really believe that every creator, every filmmaker deserves transparent information on data and their money. So delivering them those payments, it's super important. And briefly on that, we need to never forget that behind every dollar that a film collects, dollar, euro, pound, Canadian dollar, whatever it may be, there's a lot of metadata, a lot of pieces of information that paint a much broader picture. So how fast did the distributor pay? What was the geographical split of the money that came in? All that together starts painting a broader picture of the performance and the profitability of a project. Data that the producers can take with them and actually go and finance better their next project or inform their financiers on more interesting insights about their potential.
And all of us can develop best practices from that. Like our group learning could just be lifted tremendously.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how much does the value of that depend a lot on having a big data pool, if you like, so you're able to compare and benchmark the projects?
Well, I'd love to kind of get Angeli's point on that, but I would say it's even valuable on a project by project basis. Just better understanding your one project at a time, having that immediacy of information and ability to analyze the information you're capturing over the course of your project is still important. So amongst the things, just a very quick example. Let's say the current status quo is, as a producer, you would get that one PDF report shared with you at best at the end of the year. That tells you, okay, this is how much your film sold. What can you do? You can't do anything with that information a year down the line. You can't react in any way to that information. That's already historical. So that the ability to get, let's say, the most recent quarter report on how much your film made, what was your royalties for that particular project. Let's say you see that it sells really well in Germany. Well, maybe that makes an interesting point for you to start tackling more German language markets. Go to the Netherlands, go to other markets. So that really sort of enables producers to be a lot more proactive and rather than just passive in this process.
Yeah, I just want to chime in with that. Like what Irene is pointing out, film is a living, breathing thing that you need to react in real time to. And we have the ability to do that, and yet we haven't unlocked it, right? So we haven't actually unlocked the full potential of our product, right? In that, you look at something, say, I'm a devotee of, I'm sorry, I forgot how to take my hand down here. Where did that go? I thought it was under, it won't let me do it. But disregard that hand in the upper left. I'm a devotee of Substack. I have a newsletter I publish a couple times a week on that. And I get payments every single day, and I get real-time analytics of the engagement levels of the different people. And I can evaluate who my super users are. I know who shares my stuff. It's super helpful if I was going to actually try to use that to maximize revenue. There's no reason we couldn't be doing that for all of our TVOD, anything that's online. And you start to see that we don't know how to prepare for that, right? We don't have the details, like how do you unlock the potential of engagement in the midst of release? There actually are things that we can do. There is that information, which I think is a softball right to you, Angeli.
Thank you so much for that very subtle flip over the fence. No, I appreciate that. And hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here. And thank you, Alex, for having me as well. That's exactly right. So at Diesel Labs, we're measuring basically every single atom of audience engagement across the entire spectrum of where people talk about their favorite films, their favorite movies. So everything from your Facebooks and Instagrams to your TikToks and your Reddits and everything in between. And so what that enables enables us to do is actually understand precisely what you just described. Not just, are people getting excited about something in the weeks, months, and sometimes even years before something comes out, but who are they? What can we learn about them? Are they influencers? What kind of networks do they have? And where do we see surprise groups coming into the picture and getting involved and sharing their voices and getting excited about film? And how can we then kind of find more of those pockets of individuals to really accelerate our messaging and put the right content in front of the right people? I always say that right now we're facing kind of unprecedented challenges in every form and fashion. So first and foremost, obviously, just the whole, distribution model of theatrical releases was rocked fairly heavily with the pandemic. But we also know that right now, we all as individuals are getting our marketing messages from so many different places. There used to be a little bit of unification in there where everyone is watching certain specials or certain sports or what have you. But even now, the mechanism to watch those very same programs means that we're all getting different messaging throughout those programs. And so we have there's the one challenge, which is there's so much content now. Our calendars show us, 20, 30, 40 brand new things coming out every single day. It's a staggering amount of content. And then trying to actually put your messaging with limited marketing funds in front of those individuals. How do we do that intelligently? How do we find those groups of people who are really going to enthusiastically advocate and help those marketing dollars work harder by sharing their thoughts and feelings about the content as well?
And you see just from that too, right? Like how that could relate back to the Greenlight process and how we could actually have a better practices within that. That I think I have a film that's out right now on Amazon called Cassandra, right? Gael Garcia Bernal, hopefully will be nominated for an Oscar because he's brilliant in it, right? There's a scene in the movie that felt tailor-made in some ways to become either a meme or to somehow, penetrate that this, the era of distraction. Yeah. How do you break through, right? In that we had, scripted, and then we cast this unknown actor, best known as Bad Bunny. Right, the producers actually spent their money to cast him because we didn't have it in the budget to make it work, even though he basically worked for free. When you have someone like Bad Bunny, you need a lot of security and so on. But he was still kind of popping in his global takeover of our, of all culture. And in the scene, Gael's character, who's gay, kisses him, right, deeply on the mouth. And we're like, oh my God, that image alone could break the entire internet, right? You see how early release drops of certain imagery can really move things. But did we single that out in the Greenlight process? Did we say, this film actually has 5 memeable, items, that we have these things that could work as social moments on all these different social media platforms? Had we had that, we would have had a strategy on how to do that too, on how best to use it. It dropped. It didn't really do much damage to the internet. It felt transactional. And I think that theme, like just in the beginning when Irina was talking, you start to see that when we get a statement at the end of the year, that's all it's saying is your product is transactional, right? But film is an art form that transforms people's lives. And it does that more and more when you see all of the different points that people can engage with it, and you actually utilize those points. So it's part of our daily experience. As Angelique pointed out, like in this world where we're getting hit with so many things, how do you use what's available to us? It should be part of the Artist Bill of Rights that we have total access, transparency of the data that our work generates, right? It should be part of the Greenlight process that says that this fulfills the Artist Bill of Rights, right? It should highlight what is the state of the art that we can use to gain competitive advantage in this world of abundance, of cultural abundance? How can we use these tools? Are you developing better practices to do that in your process? Because if not, you're losing. If we reduce everything down to the Greenlight process is just about profit, it's not about brand awareness, it's not about goodwill that's brought to our companies that are releasing these films, it's not about gaining competitive advantage, it's not about cultural relevancy. All of these things should be part of the Greenlight process, not just the comps, who are the old actors, the old directors, and the old genres that worked previously when the world was built differently. How do we build things for today? That's the flaw of the Greenlight process, is it's not about trying to move into the future. It's only looking towards the past.
Well, and I think it's so interesting that you say that, because my heart goes out to everyone who is creatively involved in these projects. So we're coming at it from a data perspective. And people often ask me, they're like, Anjali, is AI going to take over? Is data going to take over? Is it going to suck all the creativity out of the process? And I'm like, absolutely not. That's not what the data is here for. The data is here to enable our friends on the creative side to do the passion projects that they all care so much about, and also to give everyone the opportunity to put the work out there in a very meaningful way. And that has just gotten really, really tough given how much stuff there is out there in the world already. It used to be that, getting your project funded was like the biggest milestone. And now it feels like there are several other equally difficult milestones that have to be met through the process, which is, what is the marketing strategy? How are we going to take advantage of this hopefully internet breakable moment of, an intimate scene with Bad Bunny? Well, companies like ours, we're tracking, Bad Bunny's engagement in real time, constantly. We know exactly who's engaging with him in his profiles, wherever they might be. And we also know when we see sort of disruptive amounts of conversation in any direction. These are things actually that we're preparing now to kind of feed into all of these really sophisticated and smart AI models so that the decisioning can happen faster. Imagine if, our team or any team could have come to you to say, hey, Bad Bunny right now is on an uptick. There's a really interesting swing in his favor. Now would be a great time to harness all of that great, the imagery that you have and become a part of this conversation. And this could have happened before the film was even in the can, right? Because you had these assets ready on standby. And so just I know I'm spitballing and I'm very outside of my box, which is a data box here, but I appreciate your kindness in letting me spitball here, because I do see I guess I am very optimistic about how these various elements can come together in service of all these amazing projects.
It's interesting. Calvin Mays in the chat box just wrote, film tech equals new wave, right? Which, when the question often should be precisely, how do we apply these things in the Greenlight process? That if we actually built in that goal, this process has the potential to be a test kitchen, where we could gain competitive advantage or break through the noise, gain distinction, in the awareness level of our film early. We want each of our films to do it in 3 ways. We don't request that happens. Does it say anywhere in the Greenlight process that we are trying to develop 4 new best practices for data analysis, or for, addressing the recognizable trends, already in the industry, or to make sure that we capture the material in such a way that allows for the porting to different platforms in the manufacture of social moments? Sure, people are going to start to say, like, wait, I thought I was trying to make both art and commerce here, and now you're saying I need to do engagement too. Well, the answer is yes, you actually do. If you want to unlock all the inherent power, the transformative power of the human spirit, with your movie, you have to start to look at it. And I think it goes back to the very beginning question, about the Greenlight process. Have we done, do all companies, do all artists and entrepreneurs do the basic process of saying, okay, what are the first principles that we're built on that we want to engage with, right? And that might be like, I'm trying to, make the greatest movie of all time, or I'm trying to make something that speaks to my community, or I just want to have a film that gets into the top festivals, or I want to have a profitable venture, right? Whatever those principles are, and then, or I guess the profitable one would be more of a goal. How, what from these principles, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve with this movie? And then what are the tactics that we need to employ so that they're based on the first principles, and that they're driven towards the goals that, like, very rarely does that even come into account. Like, it just doesn't feel like that.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, normally it's just like, let's get it made. Let's just get it made any way we can. And then we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the distribution marketing. And so how much do you think that sort of mindset's been exacerbated by the streaming kind of model, where you have this is obviously what strikes have been all about, but that idea that there's no, it's a flat fee, there's no upside, and so it's really, you're just as a filmmaker for hire. So my cat
has been unleashed.
He gets very upset about streaming. Yeah, carry on.
No, I think, I can't speak to the upside and sort of the financial aspect of it. And I definitely would like to hear Irina's thoughts on that in just a second. From where we sit, it's sort of like if a tree falls in the woods, right? There's so much content that comes out. I mean, if I quizzed everybody here right now, could you name, the 15 things that came out on Netflix this year, or 10 things that
this week?
Exactly, this week. I don't think many of us could answer that question. And now that's not to say that every single piece of content is designed to generate, Barbie or Barbenheimer levels of engagement. Certainly not. But at the same time, having that engagement in certain communities to raise awareness, to kind of help make sure people even know that that content exists, because otherwise a vast majority of that content, especially when it's being distributed by the streamers, is getting almost zero marketing attention, at least not from a traditional marketing campaign perspective, outside of maybe some of their own channels. And so that, I think, inherently makes it really, really difficult if you're not thinking smartly about how to make sure people pick that message up and carry some of that water for us, because we know the marketing dollars are so limited.
Oh, absolutely. And I would love to chime in on the fact that, well, first of all, we're seeing this requirement coming in more and more from the industry. In Europe, we have the European Copyright Directive being legislated to essentially empower creators with knowledge and access to financials. In North America, well, the guilds, they've been pushing for demanding better pay, residuals, transparency, and of course the well-legislated use of AI. So everything takes us to the exact same point. Well, there needs to be more data that is shared back with the creators, and also more equitable pay. So in that sense, there was an interesting question I've seen in the chat where Raphael asked, is there precedence for negotiating data transparency in the greenlighting process? And I would say, yes, we're seeing this. I think what we're fighting is fighting with a lot of the times with adoption. We're fighting with folks not wanting to take advantage of all the data that could be shared with them. So, but in our work as a digital collection agent, we see this all the time. We've seen projects that have been structured in a way where every single incoming gross receipt is shared across all the parties in the project, whether it's producers, talent. Everyone gets an opportunity to see. Of course, these are at the moment exceptions, but the technology, the ability to share that data is there. It's with them. It's just a matter of choice. But one of the things that we're seeing on our end, based on the experience of the past, let's say post-pandemic, we're seeing sales agents, distributors, coming in and actually strategizing how can they become more perceived and actually making changes internally to become that transparent distributor, that transparent sales agent, to improve the communication and ultimately have a leg up in the negotiations with talent, where talent do have options of where they want to take their content. So we're also seeing that change in that direction, which is very optimistic from where we stand.
And it speaks of the real potential with a shift in the process, how that could affect both the revenue, the ecosystem, and the products themselves. Let's look at the world, right? We don't really try to look at the sustainability of our planet in the pricing of objects right now, and look where it's got us, right? We haven't looked at things like equitable wealth or diversity and inclusion aspects in all the businesses that we do, right? How do we what if we started trying to care to better this world in the process? If that was part of our responsibility, or at least an evaluation, could it change things, right? So when I, entered the corporate side of the film business, most of the Greenlight process only used traditional comps, right? The director, the stars, the past performance of the genre, right? And the history of film at that point in time was dominated by white, straight men of a certain age, right? Those were the stars, those were the directors, and those were the people that partook in the genre. So if you were basing it on comps, you were biased to continue that trend. How do you change that so you can actually say like, wait a second, there's something wrong. We can build a better mousetrap. All it took was actually looking towards cultural relevancy, right? Because we might only have, some people think, 60 story forms or whatever themes that people care about. I don't agree to that. But to that date, they were made by and starring folks from a very certain perspective, right? If you are in an audience acquisition business, which is what the current business model of the global streaming platforms is, you have to engage with the other half of the world that isn't that, right? Or whatever that percentage is. And so once you started addressing questions of cultural relevancy, you knew that you had to build into your process some diversity and inclusion tactics, and just a much wider spread of taste offerings, so, that you could, to actually acquire those audiences so they could see themselves represented before and behind the camera. It was a simple little fix that really needed to be done, and it improved the business. I think in those same sort of things, if in the Greenlight process, you were trying to create sustainability of the ecosystem and a forward-looking effort towards that, a constant experimentation with new tactics and new tech to learn how to unleash the power that's inherent within cinema itself, you would see even a greater level of engagement. All boats would rise, the audiences would rise, and we just have to start to address that. We've ignored it for far too long.
I think that's right. And I see in the comments also someone saying, well, how do we define history? How do we think about what those benchmarks are? And I would second the motion that I think it was Christopher who made, which is, looking at 10 years of data at this point for theatrical, it's kind of pointless because, 10 years includes the entire pre-pandemic era. It includes the year where we couldn't all go to theaters. And so being strategic and being thoughtful also about how rapidly our society changes culturally, to the point I think, Ted, you're trying to make, which is, all of a sudden, 3 years ago, we're now watching all of our content in streaming platforms, and these streaming platforms are global in nature. So how, that's why we get Squid Game in the United States, and that's why we get to export other content to other places. And so, being being careful about that and being sort of strategic and analytical about how to look at that information and then how to quantify the impact of different projects, I think is really important. One of the things we hear all the time is content valuation has become one of the largest challenges because all these platforms tend to keep the most important metrics fairly close to the vest. So we never really quite know how many people watch something on a Netflix or how many people watch something on a Disney Plus. They give us obfuscated metrics. This many minutes were watched, and you have to do the math with runtime and all of that. But that's one of the things we're trying to kind of figure out is, can we create an understanding evaluation, and even if it's imperfect, can it maybe help us come to, the two sides of the table and arrive at, to your point about greenlighting and negotiations, arrive at something satisfactory where both parties feel like they're actually gaining tremendous value out of the transaction. Not to make it all sound so boring or distill it down to just that mechanical aspect of it, but I think that's a big part of how we get to make all these amazing pieces of content.
I would argue that like America, the American independent system, allowed its best competitive advantage, which was or two forms of its best competitive advantage: the wide amount of private equity that was interested in the independent film space, on one hand, and the wide range of financing and exploitation opportunities, revenue drivers, as the other, which was shared globally. We, now, and I think Irina could, show this very clearly. We've given a completely unfair competitive advantage, a monopolistic ability to the global streaming platforms, where they are the primary, huge percentage of all revenue that comes in, to the extent that certain genres can no longer really be expected to recoup currently, along the way. And with that, frankly, even, certain creative entities are excluded from the process, because what we used to have were so many different bites at the apple, right? And you would recognize films that might have, failed to address different mitigating factors in their theatrical release. For one reason or another, they failed in theatrical, but then they totally killed it in on the home video platform when we had physical goods. And they, to such a degree that they spawned, sequels, after that. And now, between the dominance, the monopolistic practices of the global streaming platforms, the barrier to entry, because no one's going to go out and build a competitor on a global basis, as we've seen. Even the experts with the most amount of capital, the other studios, have failed in that degree. We don't have alternative revenue streams to tend to right now. I would argue that those in the independent space would be wise to build in that as a criteria in the Greenlight process, ability to re-strengthen the infrastructure to provide alternative routes of revenue to it, would be super wise to do. You have to build it back better, in the words of our president, ideally together, to make it work again, or else we're going to actually then lose the insights which, Anjali and others need so desperately, to where you see that there are actually course correctors that you can do. We get stuck in ruts doing the same thing, even when they no longer deliver the same results. Hello, Marvel.
Irina, are you seeing any new forms of finance or new trends in terms of the projects that you have been
we are
working
Alex
with?
We're constantly seeing, well, people are creative, they're constantly looking, how can we finance this, how can we be more independent? So that's it. How can we rely less, and how can we have keep more creative power. Amongst some of the interesting methods, for example, we've seen a crowd equity campaign and funding mechanism that has done excellent coming out of Europe. Of course, there's some limitation in the US, but we're starting to see in the US as well more crowd equity campaigns. So not crowdfunding, but actually proper crowd equity funding. But
Just is that Web3 specifically, or just general equity?
It can, but it doesn't have to. That's the thing.
Okay.
But the big challenge when you do such a crowd equity campaign, which is, first of all, comes with some added legal costs for the producers, a lot of marketing to actually promote it. It also comes with investment management headache, because you do sit on let's say on a capital table with hundreds, if not more, of financiers, micro investors that need to also get paid and have information and data. We've been able to actually support a number of these projects, and it's been fantastic to actually see them work. And that has been invigorating. We're seeing, okay, so particularly for project, it's not for every project, but for those projects that have been able to create a community around a story, they're actually able to capitalize on that.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I think touching on that, the idea of building a community as part of the development process. So you're coming to the Greenlight process, or the Greenlight point, with an audience already in the bag, and maybe some equity funding as well. Ted, Anjali, any thoughts on that side of including the audience at that early stage?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the earlier you can make people aware of what you're working on, the better in most cases, I would say. Or at least it helps you understand, is your like the creative idea resonating with different groups of individuals? And if so, how are they talking about it? How are they thinking about it? Because there's so much we can learn from the way that, for example, you guys have all had this happen to you, right? Where someone else tries to describe what your job is, and you hear someone else for the first time trying to say, hey, this is, what Irina does. This is what Anjali does. But there's so much to learn from just how other people will describe what you're working on, because we're all too close to our own work to really have that sort of independent perspective. And so one of the cool things that we're doing right now is AI, and I know I keep bringing it up, and I'm sorry to beat the drum because I'm sure everyone is sick of hearing about this topic these days. It feels like it's taken over all of the news waves, but it can summarize information in a way that previously we as humans really couldn't do very efficiently. So we here at Diesel Labs, we're sitting on billions of data points, millions and millions and millions of comments, thoughts, unsolicited information from audiences. And we could kind of sort of crunch all of that in some regard through like human efforts, human and, data science efforts. Now we can summarize it instantly. That means that I can literally get a summary of what people were saying about a piece of content yesterday. How did that change today? What did last week look like? It can all be done so quickly. We can do it for every single piece of content in our system, which is tens of thousands of pieces of content. Just the efficiency with which we can now take these crazy, unstructured, really difficult to understand environments and distill it down to, okay, people are talking really positively about your film. Here's the words that they're using. And this is kind of today. You guys were talking about that one piece of paper you get a year after the film is out. Imagine if you could get that piece of paper every day while you were still working on it, and it had not just sort of your box office potential and all of that good revenue information, but also the audience potential, who's looking forward to it. I feel like there's so many great ideas and different ways we can put this information together to really enable all of our friends who are out there, making some of these amazing, amazing pieces of content.
There's so much that comes from that I have to say, like, on one hand, I just think of, God, all the missed opportunities we've had, in the last couple of years, the last decades, but also the fact that, maybe now is the time to do it. It's not too late. And there's all that opportunity. When you think of all the things that are missing that could help us do our work and our art better, right? But again, I go back to first principles, which I love, because on one hand, I love that the film industry, embraced a lot of principles from the startup community and embraced, has embraced to some degree a lot of new tech. But we have to do it better, and we have to always do it with what our real goals are in mind. All cultural industries are often referred to as also the passion industries, which is like the beauty of the human spirit. We love, right? We really get engaged, and we look for those things that tell us about who we are, that are transformable, about transformational, whatever that word is, about how we can change and grow at any time. And you want to keep that filter alive. Like when you think about what a social moment is, a social moment is authentic, right? Like that's the key piece. It doesn't just feel authentic. It's like the best things are authentic. And so often when people see all the opportunity for, if we could actually harvest data, and develop best practices, which we can, when we see all that opportunity, people start to think, oh, we're surrendering to the machines. No, we're not surrendering to the machines. We still want it to be guided by the people who know best. And I would say it is actually the folks who are either the artists or have spent, a good chunk of their life in a specific field and understand the wide variety of mitigating factors that are always out there. But how do we actually still keep that alive? Like when I first joined Amazon, my boss was a man, Roy Price, who was always like, yeah, we look at all the data and then we decide from the gut. And I love that, right? Like let's try to decide what's there and what makes sense, because there always are, flaws in the machine, flies in the ointment, and cracks in the wall where the light gets through, right? And that's wonderful that that's there, because it actually is the kind of inadvertent, happy accident that often can make something be true to the moment that we're living in. How do we do that? Look at all that's missing. We don't have a map of the film ecosystem and all the participants in a global basis, but it's actually doable. We actually don't know how to address the audiences where they actually engage, but it's actually doable. We can develop through the tools, that both Diesel and Film Chain offer. We can actually get so much better at both of those processes. We can get closer to that goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's, if you asked a lot of people, like, what's the problem with filmmaking today, or what are the problem with the films being produced, it'd be like, it's too much reliance on data or algorithmically decided. But that's not what we're saying here. Is that it's using the data in a different way and having more people having access to more data points and making that more transparent. We have a few questions in the chat. I'm going to try. We haven't got long. I'm going to try and keep them focused on the Greenlight process. Ian Edgar is asking, are there any examples of people using data impactfully in the creative decision making process? I'm thinking. I'm thinking. Yeah. Any examples on that?
Absolutely. I mean, gosh, we can do all kinds of things. So, for example, there are some folks out there who have come to us and said, hey, I'm looking to cast this particular role in this film, and I already have the leads cast. I know what the story is. It's based on this, book or whatever. And we're able to actually put all those things together and say, okay, well, the group of people who most likely are going to be, coming to sit for your film also love these kinds of individuals. They love this kind of music. So this is where, we can actually help take, maybe you already have a list of 4 or 5 or 10 people that you're considering for a particular role. And we can actually say to you, like, hey, these folks match really well into this audience. These folks are at the inverse. And depending on what your strategy is and what you're trying to do and which audiences you're trying to attract, that can actually help you make that decision. I remember it was actually a smaller film company that came to us, and they cast, it was a story about a slightly older woman whose husband cheats on her, and then she ends up in a relationship with a younger man. And so they were trying to figure out, like, how to cast those two roles in an interesting way that would be sort of appealing multi-generationally. And we were able to use our data to do some of that. In addition to the point Ted was making earlier, we can actually distill from the very first sets of marketing that are put out the door. What are the pieces that got audiences talking, excited, anticipating your film? And then how do we kind of find more of those types of moments? Like, how do we figure that out? So of course, it's the gut first that says, here are the ones we're going to test. And then we can actually come back and say, these are the ones that are working. And that's just scraping the top of the iceberg here in terms of different ways that we've seen our data used. We've also seen it used to say, we can do a sitcom with this person or this person, how should we think about that? There are all kinds of things that can be answered with the data. The trick is setting it up correctly, and then really, and again, this is where we come in, right? Which is doing the math right, because you don't want to end up with misinformation or misleading information. You really have to know how to interpret it correctly so that it can actually empower the decisions that you're making.
It's interesting to me, like I've seen a ton of business plans for movies. If each of those producers and filmmakers, went to Diesel and Film Chain ahead of time and said, okay, I want to show you the addressable audience for my film and the different points of engagement. And then here are how such films in genres and audiences and, themes and analysis, psychographics or whatever, have addressed those and earned revenue from the past. And this is, a subset of such films and where that revenue comes from. And so we're looking to diversify our revenue streams in proven ways, that Film Chain has demonstrated, and we have these tactics to address that, to build those revenue streams using those addressable audiences. I bet you would see a lot more of those films getting financed.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things too that we've been working with Anjali on with Future of Film Incubator, really trying to give the filmmakers that insight and create a different pipeline, to create a different way to bring the stories, a more effective pipeline. So I completely agree. We've covered so much here, and I'm gonna really try to hurriedly summarize some of the key points. I mean, we talked about data transparency, more data points, really using those creatively. A lot of this also touches on a longer term approach, and really, as Ted pointed out, knowing what your end objectives are and embedding that into your decision making, your Greenlight process, your Greenlight pitch. It also bringing communications and the marketing process, and I mean marketing not in just tweets and stuff. It's about what is the value of your product, understanding the value of your product and the value of in the marketplace, and bringing that into the creative process and really placing an emphasis on that and thinking about how to leverage those Bad Bunny moments. And some of the things, I think the thing which is resonating with me here is that some of this is individual, right? Some of this is like, we can do this on our own. We can make that decision. We can say, yes, I'm going to go this way. But some of this is also more collective and more structural. And I don't know, what does that look like? Is that a loose grouping of organizations? Any thoughts, Ted, on that in terms of how we bring this together as a collective, or indeed, Irina? In fact, Irina, tell me, you work so closely with not only the filmmakers, but a lot of technology companies as well. How do we solve this?
Yeah, I mean, Alex, it's all about adoption. At the end of the day, this is not a technology problem. The tech is there. You can do a lot with already technology, like financial technology that's been available and used on, Ted mentioned Substract. I can mention a number of other solutions that are using real-time payments, other industries. Why haven't we seen it up to now? Why aren't people getting their dollars, euros, pounds paid into their account as soon as a distributor pays into a film account? These are all things that I really believe it's not a tech problem. It's an adoption problem. It's a matter of companies really taking a hard look and seeing, well, why aren't we using it? And one of the things, for us at FilmChain, when it comes to data automation and even that step further, AI, what we're really bullish and really excited about is, well, how can that change particularly the accounting, the finance, and the legal side of things in the film and in the film world. On one hand, for example, on the legal side, which is also part of our work, we actually think that, well, drafting a simple legal contract could become it's already a commodity with the use of some of these AI technologies. Well, you're only going to have human input and on very complex structures or deals. On the other hand, audits have been for years some of the most expensive things out there, expensive, time consuming. But now imagine you have auditors may have a real-time data feed into some of these distributors' royalties statements. Well, and one of the things we always say at FilmChain is it's much easier to cheat if a statement comes in years down the line. It's very hard to cheat when you have to lie consistently. So these are some of the things that we think are very important to actually use this technology for everyone, producers, talent, financiers, to come together and try to push for more auditability.
Yeah.
And Irina's point right there about how easy it's been to cheat. Who does that benefit? It benefits those that got there first and amassed their power and kept others out, right? That cheating was built into the revenue stream of many of these existing companies doing things the old way. And all of that can be changed very easily. Like, it probably will start with the government bodies outside of the US that do funding. It can totally start with the philanthropic funders that are out there, but also the kind of leaders, I think, is always in the independent film space, that would actually say that we want to make sure that everything is fair, that we've embarked on processes that provide transparency and access to the data, that we are trying to build a sustainable film ecosystem that has multiple revenue points and allows for new entries and a fair level playing field and fair competition. And we have to build in innovation as a goal to our process. It has to be fair, safe, innovative, and frankly fun. Right? How do we do that? And that is an improvement of the process. Just say those things matter along the way, that we treat people decently, and the data is there. And then we would have best practices so that before somebody brought the film to market, people would be doing meetings with Anjali and Irina. I would never meet with those folks unless they've already met with them.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I feel like there's so much more work to do, but I think there's some really clear takeaways from this. And what I was reaching for before was a place where we can perhaps take this conversation further, to build on it. And I realized I neglected to mention at the beginning of this webinar that this is a webinar presented by Screenovators, which is a completely free community dedicated to innovation in film and the screen industries. I put the link in the chat there. Come and join us. We're hosted on Discord. There's no agenda other than let's work together, let's share innovation, and let's push things forward collectively. Huge thank you to Ted, Irina, and Anjali. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and your wisdom today. Thank you for everyone joining. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to everyone's questions, but again, this is something which we can pick up on Screenovators. Just click on that link and head to Discord, and we can chat there. Yeah, this has been great. We've got another episode in this series coming up next month. We're going to be focusing on marketing, but as we talked about today, marketing needs to start right at the inception point and not as an afterthought. So I'll leave that as the thought there. Have a great day, everyone. Strike's over, hooray! And see you soon on the circuit. Cheers.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Nice
Thank you
meeting
so
guys.
much, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.